Hey guys, this week I had the opportunity to sit down with Jason Stier. Jason Stier is a lender with Movement Mortgage and he specializes in everything VA. He is definitely my first call whenever I have questions about the VA loan, anything with the process, different qualifications, anything like that. He's my go to. So, again, I thought that the best thing to do would be to sit down with him, pick his brain, and get all that information straight to you guys. So, without further ado, enjoy my interview with Jason Stier. 2022 is shaking out to be just as traumatic as 2020. 2021, it seems like all of everything is just never ending with like the news, and real estate is in the news a lot lately.
Yeah.
So I wanted to jump on here and talk with you. You know, a lot of the people seeing this are our previous clients, so
Yeah,
they know us already.
for
So
sure.
tell me, like, fill me in on what mortgage in 2022 has been like and kind of what you guys see going forward for the rest of the year.
Yeah, so 2022 has been a little bit of a challenge. I mean, I think people got used to these historically low interest rates that we had in 2021 and towards the tail end of 2021, I guess, but mostly during, 2020 and 2021. And it's a little bit of a shock to people now when you're quoting rates because the market inflation, inflation and the 10-year treasury bond do not get along when they're fighting against each other. And the one who typically wins is inflation, and rates start to rise. And there's a saying that we use that the inflation is the mortal enemy of the 10-year treasury bond.
Mhm.
And so it's been a little bit of a challenge, right? I mean, you feel these rocky. I mean, we're thinking, okay, it's going up a little bit. We're good. It's flattened out. They've kind of got some things under control. And then here we go again, right? There's bombshells dropped, or the Fed, or something like that, and then we go on this upcycle, and then it flattens out, and this upcycle again, and so it's like a roller coaster that everybody wants to get off of,
Yeah.
and because the biggest thing is buyers are losing buying power,
Mhm.
right? Especially when it relates to a lot of our clients or active military and BAH and things like that. It's taking a big hit.
So, for someone that doesn't really understand what that means, like when you say it reduces buying power,
Sure.
break that down exactly. What does that mean?
Yeah. So comparatively, let's say rates 18 months ago versus rates today, which could be 2% higher. Your payment is going to go up because the interest rate's higher, and it makes your payment to where it's not affordable for that price range. So instead, you could lose $30,000 to $40,000 in sales price just based on interest rate and the comfortability of your payment. And
Okay.
so it's thrown a lot of home buyers into the rental market because it's thrown them into a category that may have been uber competitive, and they just get buyers frustration because it's
Mhm.
tough. And so, we're trying to have these conversations with people that, obviously in our world and just from an investment standpoint, owning is always better than renting because it's the only money that you'll spend that is anti-inflation. And what I mean by that is if you have money in a TSP or a 401k, if I look at my 401k right now, it makes me want to vomit because what I've seen since January 1st. But home prices have still gradually gone up. So it's your best investment against inflation. And so those are the kinds of conversations that we're trying to have with people, and breaking it down into its simplest form because it's very confusing. But trying to figure out those points, like you just mentioned, what does that do to my buying power? What does it do to my investment? And one of the things I'm sure you've been asked a million times is this a bubble, right? Are we in a housing bubble like we were in 2008? And the answer to that question is no. 2008 was built on a house of cards and some basically fake loan programs with everybody that had a heartbeat was getting a loan. And it flooded the market with basically securities that weren't worth anything. This is pure supply and demand. So if there's any, in my opinion, and I'm not obviously a market expert, I just try to pay attention to this and read as much as I can. And having lived in the mortgage business through 2008, this is not the same thing. So my advice is always owning, even if you have to buy less house. It's better than renting. Make your own payment. Don't make a landlord's.
Perfect. That's the same advice that I like to give clients and people in general when they talk about buying versus renting. I totally agree with you. I think even if you're buying less of a house, so if you even buy a 250 house when maybe last year you were looking at a 350 house, even buying that 250 house is a much better investment than going back and renting that
For sure.
$300,000 house.
Yeah, you
So
lose the tax benefit, right? Wanting to write off the interest. You lose actually building a savings account through equity appreciation, right? So your house is going to appreciate. Even if prices have a tendency to flatten out, you're still going to have, 3 to 4% on average based on some core logic data that is what your equity is going to appreciate every year, not to mention your principal appreciation by you just making your payment. So, and then there's just the pride of home ownership, taking care of something that's yours. And we've got a lot of clients that have owned, military and otherwise that have owned houses for 18 to 24 months that are, if they decide to sell it, are making a nice little nest egg on those, and they can afford to buy other houses or make other investments. So it opens up so much possibilities in home ownership. And one stat I always like to share is that the average renter's net worth is $6,300. The average homeowner net worth is $253,000. That's not by accident. It's because we continue to invest in ourselves and in that financial instrument that is inflation proof.
yeah. So how has your advice to your clients changed over the last 12 months? What's something that you're telling them today that maybe you weren't telling them 12 months ago?
Even back, November timeframe, right? So just 9 months ago, we weren't having these inflationary conversations. We weren't having to talk about, losing that much buying power because your rates were so high or so much higher. And that is really a sticking point for people. They look at it and they get so tunnel vision and so singular focused, like, oh my gosh, I can't afford that. We weren't having those conversations back then because rates were still in the threes.
Mm.
Well, now they're in the fives. So that's a big difference. And we're having to provide a lot more financial data and provide them with some data that breaks it down to where the average consumer can palate these things. A lot of this stuff is like right over the top of your head. And if you listen to, the so-called experts on CNBC and even Fox Business and all these things, they talk in a language that most people are never going to understand. And they check out mentally. That's just basic human psychology. So trying to break it down in such a way to where the client understands and visually can see and conceptualize this is potentially what could happen to me in 4 years if I decide to sell. It's a game changing thing because they don't see it in that aspect. So we're having a lot more of those conversations than we ever have in the past because we've never had to combat inflation in almost 20 years.
Do you think that that may be a result of like fear and sticker shock put together, and that you won't necessarily have to jump through so many hoops to educate a buyer because they're getting so much? I would classify like as misinformation, bad information from the media about what's happening in the real estate market, or at least even if the media is saying what's happened, they're not explaining correctly like what that means to the average person. So
Right.
do you think that once we kind of get past this point of, a buyer entering the market and they think that interest rates could go way up, if we go into a market where a buyer is entering the market and interest rates stay pretty consistent and flat, do you think that'll take a little bit of the fear and the tension out of the
I
situation?
think it'll take a little bit out of it simply because, and this is my opinion, is that doom and gloom sells. That's clickable, right? People want to click on it, they want to watch it on TV, they see it on social media, and they read it and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't move or I can't do these things. And I think once the economy stops being subject one A and then two and two A in the news cycle, then I think that's going to change a little bit because the access of information that people have these days is the height of our existence. And so, you know, they're clicking everything and seeing things everywhere. And then when they come to us or they get to you, we're having to undo all of these things that they have seen because there's fear there. And they may not necessarily know how to articulate that fear, but their brains have already absorbed it. And we've got to get to the root of the problem to do that. And I think once this starts to subside a little bit and the media no longer has to focus on inflation and how bad the Fed has handled this situation, I think that narrative is going to change a little bit. And what I hope is that people still continue to talk about it, real estate as an investment and not just a place where you lay your head down at night.
That's promising. And like you and like me, I think that we probably have a pretty optimistic outlook of the real estate market, which is not something that I think a lot of the public has.
Yes.
Which it kind of makes, I don't know if you feel this, but it makes me feel a little guilty when I see like all these numbers happening in the media. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what the housing market needed, was all these slowing in sales, price
Yeah.
reductions. Like that's exactly what we needed. And the media is kind of like doing exactly what you said, using that fear to make people click on stories, not understanding like the implication of, okay, but why and how and
Mhm.
what and how does this affect me? So,
Yeah.
so you do mostly VA loans.
Yes.
You're able to do all loans.
98% of my business is helping active military and veterans.
So, and you're always my first call. Whenever I have a VA question, you're my first text, and you always have the right answer, or at least know where to find it.
Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about VA loans right now. Is there anything on the horizon that we should be looking for? Any changes coming up? Anything that we should have on our radar?
I mean, right now it's always, to me, has always been and always will be about education, right? The VA is constantly under new leadership, which is a good thing. Tweaking some things and being more proactive with their communication and not so ambiguous, right? Anybody who's followed the VA or been through the VA benefits process, whether it's a home loan or anything else, you've been through it. It's a lot of ambiguity, right? And sometimes that's a good thing because they want people to formulate their own opinions on certain things. But in certain instances, we need that black and white clarification. Like you can or cannot do this. And under the current leadership, that is being more prevalent now than it has been in the past, which I certainly appreciate because people just want to argue with you about things and then you provide them the data and they're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. So I still don't believe. And now it's things in black and white, yeses and nos. Not so much, well, if you give you this much inch, you can look at it this way and look at it through this, this purview, you'll come to your own conclusion. They're not doing that now. And so for me, it's as someone who lives in this day in, day out, that's an easier conversation to have than because you and I know and we've experienced the roadblocks that veterans, get when it comes to home ownership. And a lot of it's misinformation. A lot of it is ignorance, in my opinion. And I think the VA is doing a better job of clearing up some of those issues as it relates to this benefit because there's a lot and we have a lot of work to do and it's getting better over the years, but we still got a long way to go.
Yeah. Well, we're really glad to have you on our side. We know that my whole team knows that you're like the absolute go-to for VA anything and general loan questions too. I mean, you definitely
Yeah,
are.
I do more than that.
Yeah,
It's one of those, but the joy that I get from doing that is what drives me to do it. But we'll do some conventional loans here and there, some investment type things and stuff like that. But majority of it is spending my time educating and advocating for that segment. And you know, you and I have had conversations with many soon to be retirees or you being medically retired. It's a very scary and daunting thing because they don't understand it. And I think trying to remove some of that fear that they have in the home ownership process is what it's all about.
yeah. Us being here to support them, educate them, and
Sure.
be someone that they can trust. Because I mean, buying a home is the largest purchase anyone can ever make. Well, not ever, but the average person, this is their largest purchase that they're going to make is
Yeah.
their home. So to be able to have people on their side that they one trust and two like, you know, it's a good feeling. Takes a little bit of stress out of a very stressful situation.
Yeah, absolutely. You take the know, like, and trust, the value that you provide, and then the education behind it. To me, it's the perfect combination. There's a lot of different tactics out there in our business, and I've always, chosen the value of education, to try to help people because we will get things in return because we help people, and that's just what we believe, and that's why our alignment has always been that way. Because not everybody unfortunately thinks like that, and that's okay. That's the lane they can go play in it. That's just the lane that we choose not to go down, and because it's hard, and this is a hard transaction, and our job is to make it easier on the people who are in the middle of it because it's confusing, and we want to try to eliminate some of that confusion in the process.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on here today. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your super busy
I
schedule.
always make time for you.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to leave our guests with as we wrap this up?
No, the only thing I can say is that if there's any military veterans that watch this, do your homework, do your research, ask the right questions, trust your relationships. You spent either a career or even 4 years being taught to trust your relationships, the people that matter, and you need to do this. This process is no different. And so my only coach to you is that you use those relationships, you understand what the value is, and ask as many questions as you need to make yourself feel better. And in the end, hopefully that serves you well.
Love it. Well, thanks so much, Jason. I'm going to put all your info in the email just in case,
Yeah,
or down below, or wherever anyone's seeing this, they can get a hold of you right away. So
anytime.
thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Anytime.